"We thought it was time we had a talk about your future, Ella," my father announced loudly across the Thanksgiving table, his voice cutting through the comfortable hum of conversation like a knife through warm butter. I looked up from my untouched plate of turkey and sweet potatoes, already sensing what was coming. The entire family had gathered at my parents' home in Portland, Oregon. My younger sister, Chloe, and her husband, Hunter, my aunt and uncle, and a few cousins I barely spoke to anymore. Everyone stopped mid-bite to watch, forks hovering in the air like they were witnessing some carefully staged performance. My mother leaned forward with a tight smile plastered on her face, the kind that never quite reached her eyes. She slid an envelope across the polished mahogany table toward me. It landed right next to my water glass with a soft thud. "We've been talking, your father and I," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "We think you need a fresh start somewhere else. Somewhere far from here where you can finally figure things out." I stared at the envelope, not touching it. Somewhere far from here. The words echoed in my mind. My heart began to race, but I kept my face neutral. Years of being dismissed had taught me to mask my emotions well. "What is this?" I asked quietly. Chloe, sitting directly across from me, grinned and pulled out her phone. She angled it toward me, clearly recording. I noticed the red light glowing faintly. Of course she was filming this. She wanted to capture my humiliation, to have proof of the moment her loser sister finally got kicked out of the family. My father cleared his throat. "Open it." I reached for the envelope slowly, feeling the weight of everyone's eyes on me. Inside was a check for $10,000 and a one-way plane ticket to Austin, Texas, dated for the following Monday. $10,000, my mother said, as though she were bestowing a royal gift. "That should be more than enough to get you settled somewhere new. We picked Austin because it's affordable and has opportunities for people like you." People like me. The phrase stung, though I refused to let it show. "We think it's best if you leave Portland," my father added. "You've been struggling here for years, Ella. Your little tech thing hasn't gone anywhere. You're 29 years old, and you're still living like a college student. It's embarrassing." I looked down at the check in my hands. $10,000. A one-way ticket. They were paying me to disappear. Chloe giggled from across the table, still recording. Hunter smirked beside her, shaking his head like he felt sorry for me. "My name is Ella, and I'm 29 years old. I've spent most of my life being treated like the family disappointment. While my younger sister Chloe was celebrated for every minor achievement, making the cheerleading squad, graduating with a business degree, landing a marketing job at a mid-sized firm, I was the one who never quite measured up. I was too quiet, too awkward, too obsessed with computers and coding. I didn't fit the mold my parents wanted. When I told them 5 years ago that I was starting a tech company, they laughed. Actually laughed. My father said I was wasting my time. My mother told me I should get a real job, maybe as an administrative assistant or a receptionist. Chloe rolled her eyes and said I was delusional. But I kept going. I worked 70-hour weeks, lived in a cramped studio apartment, survived on instant ramen and black coffee. I poured every ounce of energy I had into building my startup from the ground up. I taught myself advanced programming languages, networked with investors, attended pitch competitions, and slowly, painfully, built something real. And this morning, just hours before I walked into this Thanksgiving dinner, I had signed the final paperwork to sell my company for $8.5 million. I looked up at my parents, at Chloe's gleeful expression, at the entire table watching me like I was a wounded animal finally being put out of its misery. They had no idea, not a single clue. I forced a small, tight smile and folded the check carefully. "Thank you," I said softly. My mother's shoulders relaxed. My father nodded approvingly. Chloe lowered her phone slightly, looking almost disappointed that I hadn't broken down in tears. "We knew you'd understand," my mother said, reaching over to pat my hand. This is for the best, sweetheart. You'll see. Sometimes people just need a push to move on. I nodded, slipping the check and ticket back into the envelope. My fingers trembled slightly, but not from sadness or shame. It was anger. Pure, simmering anger that I had been swallowing for nearly 3 decades. They thought they were getting rid of me. They thought they were solving their problem. They had no idea they were about to lose the only person in this family who had actually made something of herself. I glanced at Chloe, who was still holding her phone, probably already planning to post the video online with some snarky caption about her failure of a sister. I met her eyes and gave her the faintest smirk. She frowned, confused. Good. Let her wonder. Growing up, I was always the odd one out. Chloe was born 3 years after me, and from the moment she arrived, it was clear she was the golden child. She was outgoing, charming, and effortlessly social. I was introverted, bookish, and more interested in taking apart old computers than making friends. My parents never hid their favoritism. When Chloe got a B+ on a test, they celebrated with ice cream and praise. When I brought home straight A's, they barely glanced at my report card. When Chloe joined the debate team, my parents attended every single event. When I won a regional coding competition in high school, they didn't even show up to the awards ceremony. I stopped trying to impress them somewhere around my 16th birthday. I realized that no matter what I did, I would never be what they wanted. So I focused on what I loved instead. Technology, problem solving, building things that mattered. After high school, I went to a state university on a partial scholarship. My parents refused to help with tuition, saying I needed to learn responsibility. Meanwhile, they paid for Chloe's entire college experience at a private school, bought her a car, and set her up in a nice apartment. I worked 3 part-time jobs to pay my way through school. I graduated with honors, a degree in computer science, and 0 support from my family. When I started my company 5 years ago, I didn't tell them much about it. I knew they wouldn't care. I kept my head down, worked in silence, and built something extraordinary. And now, sitting at this Thanksgiving table with their insulting check in my hand, I realized just how little they actually knew about me. My mother was talking again. Something about how Austin had a vibrant young professional scene, and how I might finally meet some nice people. I tuned her out, letting her words wash over me like background noise. I thought about the acquisition contract sitting in my lawyer's office, signed and finalized. I thought about the $8.5 million that would hit my account within the next 2 weeks. I thought about the future I was about to step into, a future they had no part in. Chloe put her phone down and reached for her wine glass, looking smug. She thought she had won. She thought she had captured the perfect moment of my defeat. She had no idea what was coming. I had always been invisible to them. Even now, as they discussed my life like I wasn't sitting right there, they saw only what they wanted to see. A failure, a disappointment, someone who needed to be managed and moved along. But I wasn't invisible anymore. I had built something they couldn't understand, achieved something they couldn't imagine. And soon, very soon, they were going to realize exactly who I was. I tucked the envelope into my purse and stood up from the table. "Where are you going?" my mother asked, startled. "Just getting some air," I said calmly. "I'll be back in a minute." I walked out onto the back porch and let the cool November air fill my lungs. The city lights of Portland glittered in the distance, and for the first time in years, I felt truly free. They wanted me gone. Fine, I would leave, but not the way they expected. I pulled out my phone and opened my email. There, at the top of my inbox, was the confirmation from my lawyer. "Acquisition finalized. Congratulations, Ella." I smiled. Let them think they won. Let them believe they had finally gotten rid of their embarrassing daughter. Let Chloe post her stupid video. Because in a few days, the news would break. And when it did, their entire world was going to shatter. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and returned to the table, my face carefully neutral. "Everything okay?" my father asked. "Everything's perfect," I said, and I meant it. The dinner continued, but I barely tasted the food. My mind was already miles away, planning my next steps. I would cash their check. Why not? It was the least they owed me after years of neglect. I would take their plane ticket and go to Austin, not because they wanted me to, but because I had always wanted to live somewhere new, somewhere I could start fresh without the weight of their judgment. But first, I would let them sit in their arrogance a little longer. I would let them think they had solved their problem. And then, I would let the truth come crashing down on them like a tidal wave. Chloe glanced at me from across the table, her expression still smug. I met her gaze and smiled sweetly. She looked away, uncomfortable. Perfect. The storm was coming, and I couldn't wait to watch them drown in it. When I think back on all those years, I can pinpoint the exact moments when I should have realized they would never see me. There was the science fair in 8th grade where I built a functioning robot from spare parts I'd collected from garage sales. I won first place. My parents didn't come to see it. They were at Chloe's soccer game, watching her sit on the bench for 90 minutes. There was my high school graduation, where I gave the valedictorian speech. My mother complained the entire time that the ceremony was too long and she was getting a headache. Chloe hadn't even bothered to show up. There was the day I got my acceptance letter to the state university with a partial scholarship. My father glanced at it and said, "Well, I hope you're planning to cover the rest yourself." And there was the day, 3 years into building my startup, when I tried one last time to share my progress with them. I showed up at Sunday dinner with a prototype of my software, excited to demonstrate what I'd created. My father barely looked up from his newspaper. My mother asked if I'd considered getting a job with benefits. Chloe laughed and said I was wasting my time. That was the last time I tried to include them in my life. I stopped going to family dinners. I stopped calling. I stopped hoping they would ever be proud of me. And I poured all of that hurt, all of that rejection, into my work. Every line of code I wrote was an act of defiance. Every investor meeting I attended was proof that I was more than they believed. Every milestone my company reached was a step further away from the girl they thought I was. By the time I walked into that Thanksgiving dinner, I had already left them behind in every way that mattered. The check and the plane ticket were just the final confirmation of what I'd always known. They didn't want me. But here's what they didn't understand. I didn't need them to want me anymore. I had wanted myself enough to succeed. Growing up, I was always the odd one out in more ways than one. While Chloe had playdates and birthday parties, I had coding tutorials and computer manuals. While she learned to navigate social hierarchies, I learned to navigate complex algorithms. My parents saw it as antisocial behavior. They worried I'd never fit in, never find a husband, never have a normal life. They sent me to therapists who tried to make me more outgoing. They enrolled me in activities I hated, dance classes, art camps, youth groups, hoping I'd develop social skills. But I just wanted to build things. I wanted to solve problems. I wanted to create software that could change how people interacted with technology. None of that mattered to them. It wasn't tangible enough. It wasn't impressive enough. It didn't fit their narrative of success. So they gave up on me and focused on Chloe, who was easier to understand, easier to mold into what they wanted. And I learned to be alone. I learned to find validation in my work instead of in their approval. I learned to measure my worth by what I could create, not by what they thought of me. It made me stronger. It made me resilient. But it also left scars that would never fully heal. Sitting at that Thanksgiving table, holding their pathetic check, I realized something profound. I had already won. The moment I stopped needing their approval was the moment I became unstoppable. They just didn't know it yet. Dinner dragged on for what felt like an eternity. My relatives made small talk about the weather, the upcoming holidays, and Chloe's recent promotion at work. She basked in the attention, describing her new responsibilities with exaggerated enthusiasm, while my parents nodded and praised her endlessly. "You've always been so driven, Chloe," my mother said, beaming. "We're so proud of you." I sat quietly, pushing mashed potatoes around my plate. No one asked me anything. No one even looked in my direction. It was as if I had already left, as if the envelope they had given me had erased me from the family entirely. When dessert was served, pumpkin pie with whipped cream, I finally spoke up. "Thank you for the check," I said, looking directly at my parents. "And the ticket. I really appreciate it." My father set down his fork and nodded approvingly. "We're glad you're being reasonable about this, Ella. We were worried you might take it the wrong way." "Not at all," I said, forcing a smile. "I think a fresh start is exactly what I need." My mother looked relieved. "I'm so glad you understand, sweetheart. This is really for the best. You've been stuck in Portland for too long, spinning your wheels. A change of scenery will do you good." Chloe snorted softly. "Yeah, maybe you'll actually find something that works out for once." I turned to her, my smile never wavering. "Maybe." She looked away, clearly unsettled by my calm demeanor. She had expected tears, anger, or at least some sign of defeat. Instead, I was agreeable, even pleasant. It threw her off balance. Good. Let her squirm. Hunter leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine. "Honestly, Ella, this is probably the best thing that could happen to you. Sometimes people need a hard reset, you know? A chance to start over somewhere nobody knows them." The condescension in his voice was barely concealed. I wanted to throw my water glass at him, but instead, I just nodded. "You're absolutely right," I said sweetly. My aunt, who had been silent most of the evening, finally chimed in. "I think it's very generous of your parents to help you like this. Not every family would be so supportive." Supportive. The word tasted like poison. "I'm very lucky," I said, my voice flat. My uncle added his 2 cents. "You know, Ella, sometimes the best thing that can happen to a person is hitting rock bottom. It forces you to reevaluate. Maybe this is your rock bottom, and you'll finally make something of yourself." Rock bottom. As if I hadn't already climbed mountains they couldn't even imagine. After dessert, the family moved into the living room for coffee. I excused myself to use the bathroom, but instead, I lingered in the hallway, just out of sight. I could hear them talking, their voices drifting from the living room. "I think that went better than expected," my father said. "Much better," my mother agreed. "I was worried she'd make a scene." Chloe laughed. "She knows she doesn't have a choice. I mean, what's she going to do? Keep pretending her little tech thing is going somewhere?" Hunter chimed in. "Honestly, I think 10 grand is generous. She's been mooching off your goodwill for years." My mother sighed. "I know. But we couldn't just cut her off completely. People would talk. At least this way. We can say we helped her get a fresh start." "Exactly," my father said. "And once she's gone, we won't have to deal with the embarrassment anymore. She's been a weight around our necks for too long." I stood frozen in the hallway, my hands clenched into fists. A weight around their necks. An embarrassment. Those were the words they used to describe me. I had known they didn't respect me. I had known they saw me as a failure. But hearing them say it so casually, so matter-of-factly, was like a punch to the gut. Then my mother's voice dropped to a whisper, but I could still hear her clearly. $10,000 is more than she deserves, honestly. But at least this way, she'll leave quietly, and we can finally move on. I just hope she doesn't come back when the money runs out." My father chuckled darkly. "If she does, we'll just ignore her calls. Once she's in Austin, she's not our problem anymore. Chloe added, I can't wait to tell everyone she finally left. It'll be such a relief not having to explain why my older sister is such a mess. People always ask about her at events, and I never know what to say. Hunter laughed. Just tell them she moved away to find herself or whatever. That's what people say when their relatives are failures. The words hit me like physical blows, one after another. More than I deserve. Not our problem. Such a mess. Failures. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. I couldn't afford to lose control now, not when I was so close to watching everything fall apart for them. I walked back into the living room, my face carefully neutral. Everything okay? My mother asked, her voice syrupy sweet now that I was back in view. Fine, I said. Just needed a moment. We stayed for another hour, making polite conversation. Chloe showed everyone photos from her recent vacation to Hawaii, and my parents oohed and awed over every picture. I sat in the corner, sipping cold coffee and counting down the minutes until I could leave. My uncle started talking about his golf game. My aunt discussed her book club. Chloe complained about her co-workers, calling them incompetent and lazy, though I knew from her own admissions that she barely did any real work herself. The conversation swirled around me, and I felt like a ghost haunting my own family gathering. Finally, around 9 in the evening, I stood up and grabbed my coat. Heading out? My father asked. Yeah, I said. Long drive back to my apartment. My mother hugged me stiffly. Good luck in Austin, Ella. We'll miss you. Liar, I thought, but I smiled and said, Thanks, Mom. Chloe waved from the couch, not bothering to get up. Send me pics when you get there. Sure, I said. Hunter raised his glass in a mock toast. To new beginnings. I walked out the door and didn't look back. The drive home was quiet. I turned off the radio and let the silence fill the car. My mind raced, replaying everything that had happened over the past few hours. They had tried to humiliate me. They had tried to erase me from their lives. And they thought they had succeeded. But they had no idea what was coming. When I got back to my apartment, I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. I pulled up the acquisition agreement and read through it one more time, just to make sure it was real. It was. $8.5 million, paid in full within 14 business days. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. I had done it. I had built something meaningful, something valuable, something that would change my life forever, and my parents had no idea. I spent the weekend packing up my apartment and tying up loose ends. I arranged for movers to take my things to Austin, updated my address with the bank, and closed out accounts I no longer needed. On Saturday, I met with my lawyer to finalize the last few details of the acquisition. She congratulated me again, her genuine warmth a stark contrast to my family's coldness. You should be incredibly proud of yourself, she said. What you've built is remarkable. This kind of exit at your age is extraordinary. Thank you, I said, and I meant it. On Sunday, I went through my apartment one last time, packing up the last of my belongings. I looked around at the tiny studio that had been my home for 5 years. It wasn't much, but it was where I'd built my company, where I'd spent countless late nights coding and problem-solving. This apartment represented my independence, my determination, my refusal to give up even when everyone told me I should. I felt a pang of sadness leaving it behind, but also excitement for what lay ahead. On Monday morning, I went to the airport and boarded the flight my parents had paid for. I settled into my seat, pulled out my laptop, and started planning the next phase of my life. Austin was warm and sunny when I landed. I took a cab to the apartment I had already rented, a spacious 2-bedroom in a nice neighborhood, paid for with my own money. I didn't need their $10,000 to survive. I had more than enough. but I cashed their check anyway. It felt symbolic, like accepting their final insult before I cut them out of my life completely. I deposited it into my account and watched the balance increase. $10,000 meant nothing to me now, but I took it anyway because they had offered it with such condescension, such certainty, that it was more than I deserved. They would regret those words. I spent the first 2 days in Austin setting up my new apartment and exploring the neighborhood. The city was vibrant and welcoming, full of creative energy and opportunity. I felt at home in a way I never had in Portland. On Wednesday morning, 3 days after Thanksgiving, I was sitting in a coffee shop near my new apartment when my phone started buzzing. Text after text, call after call, all from numbers I recognized. My mother, my father, Chloe, even Hunter. I ignored them all and opened the news app on my phone. There it was, front and center. Portland-based tech startup acquired for $8.5 million. And right below the headline was a photo of me, smiling confidently in a professional headshot I had taken months ago. I read the article slowly, savoring every word. It detailed the acquisition, praised my innovative approach to data analytics, and quoted the CEO of the acquiring company calling me one of the brightest minds in the industry. The article mentioned my background, my education, and the 5 years I'd spent building the company from nothing. It described my software as revolutionary and predicted I would be a major force in the tech industry for years to come. There was a quote from an industry analyst. "What Ella has accomplished with limited resources is nothing short of remarkable. This acquisition represents not just a financial success, but a validation of her technical vision and business acumen." I set my phone down and took a sip of my coffee, letting the enormity of the moment sink in. They knew now. They all knew. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a voicemail from my mother. I played it on speaker. "Ella, sweetie, we just saw the news. Why didn't you tell us? This is incredible. Call us back as soon as you can. We need to talk. We're so proud of you." So proud. The words were laughable. 3 days ago, I was an embarrassment. Now I was someone to be proud of. I deleted the voicemail without responding. Another buzz. A text from Chloe. "OMG, Ella! I had no idea! Why didn't you say anything? Call me!" I blocked her number. My father left a voicemail too, his tone shifting between pride and desperation. "Ella, this is your father. We need to discuss this acquisition. There are financial implications, tax considerations. Call me immediately." Of course, he was already thinking about how he could get a piece of my success. I deleted that one too. They wanted to talk. They wanted to be part of my success now that it was public, now that it reflected well on them. But it was too late. I spent the rest of the day ignoring their calls and messages. I turned off my phone and went for a walk, enjoying the warm Texas sun and the anonymity of a new city where nobody knew me as the family failure. That evening, I finally turned my phone back on. There were 67 missed calls and over 150 text messages. I scrolled through them, reading the desperation in their words. My mother, "Please call us back. We're worried about you. We need to celebrate together." My father, "We need to talk about your future. This is important. There are opportunities we should discuss." Chloe, "You can't just ignore us. We're your family. I'm your sister. We should be celebrating together." I laughed bitterly. Family. They wanted to claim me now that I was worth something, now that I had value. But where were they when I was struggling? Where were they when I was working 3 jobs to pay for college? Where were they when I poured my heart and soul into building my company? They were nowhere. They were laughing at me, dismissing me, trying to push me out of their lives. And now, they wanted back in. My aunt sent a message too. "Ella, your mother is beside herself. Please call her. She loves you very much and is so proud." I almost laughed out loud. She loves me. Where was that love 3 days ago? Even my uncle sent a message. Congratulations on your success. Your parents are thrilled. Please reach out to them. I opened a new text message and typed out a single sentence to my mother. I'm fine. Don't contact me again. Then I blocked her number. I did the same with my father, Chloe, Hunter, and the rest of my extended family who had sat at that Thanksgiving table and watched me get humiliated without saying a word. I was done. Over the next few days, the news continued to spread. I was contacted by journalists, industry leaders, and even a few venture capitalists interested in my next move. I gave a handful of carefully selected interviews, each one highlighting my journey and my vision for the future. In every interview, I was asked about my family and my support system. They've been very supportive. I lied smoothly, keeping my expression neutral. I'm grateful for the foundation they provided. I didn't owe them honesty. I didn't owe them anything. And I certainly wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of publicly acknowledging their rejection. Let them read between the lines. Let them wonder why I didn't mention them by name, why I didn't thank them specifically, why I didn't invite them to share in this moment. Meanwhile, my parents' desperation grew exponentially. They started reaching out through mutual acquaintances, trying to get messages to me. One of my old college friends called and said my mother had contacted her, begging her to pass along a message. She says she's sorry, my friend said hesitantly. She wants to make things right. She said there was a misunderstanding. Tell her it's too late, I replied calmly. My friend hesitated. Ella, are you sure? I mean, they're your parents. Maybe they deserve another chance? They stopped being my parents a long time ago, I said quietly. They made their choice. Now I'm making mine. She didn't push further, sensing the finality in my voice. A week after the news broke, I received a letter in the mail. It was from my mother, handwritten on expensive stationery, the kind she reserved for thank you notes to people she wanted to impress. I almost threw it away without reading it. But curiosity got the better of me. The letter was long and rambling, full of apologies and excuses. She claimed they had always believed in me, that they had only wanted what was best for me, that the check and the plane ticket were meant to help me, not hurt me. Every word was a lie. She wrote about how proud they were, how they had always known I was special, how they couldn't wait to celebrate my success with me. She mentioned wanting to throw me a party, to introduce me to their friends, to show me off. It was revisionist history at its finest. She was rewriting the past to fit the present, pretending that years of neglect and dismissal had never happened. I read the letter once, then tore it into pieces and threw it in the trash. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, the acquisition money hit my account. I stared at the balance on my phone screen, the numbers almost incomprehensible. $8,500,000. I had made it. I had done it on my own, without their support, without their belief, without their validation. And now I was free. I started planning my next steps carefully and deliberately. I invested a significant portion of the money in diversified portfolios managed by one of the top wealth management firms in the country. I donated substantial amounts to causes I cared about, organizations supporting women in tech, scholarships for low-income students, programs helping young entrepreneurs. I set aside funds for my next venture, already sketching out ideas for new projects that excited me. For the first time in my life, I felt truly in control of my destiny. My parents, meanwhile, were spiraling. Through the few mutual friends who hadn't yet cut me off, I heard that they were struggling to save face in their social circles. People were asking uncomfortable questions. Why hadn't they known about my success? Why hadn't they supported me? Why had they seemed so eager to get rid of me? My mother apparently broke down crying at a holiday luncheon when someone congratulated her on having such a successful daughter. She couldn't explain why she hadn't attended any of my business events, why she'd never mentioned my company, why she seemed so surprised by news that had been building for months. One of the women at the luncheon apparently said, "You must be so proud to raise such an accomplished daughter all on your own." And my mother, unable to keep up the pretense, had burst into tears and left. Chloe's smugness had evaporated entirely. The video she had recorded at Thanksgiving, my supposed humiliation, was now a source of her own deep embarrassment. She had posted it briefly to her social media before realizing how catastrophically it would backfire, then quickly deleted it. But the internet never forgets. Screenshots had circulated. People were calling her out for mocking her sister's success, for being cruel and petty, for filming what she thought was someone's lowest moment. Her carefully curated online image as the perfect daughter, the successful professional, the enviable younger sister, all of it crumbled in a matter of days. I didn't feel sorry for any of them. They had made their bed. Now, they could lie in it. The calls and messages from my family didn't stop, but they evolved dramatically in tone over the following weeks. At first it was pride and congratulations. Then it became confusion and hurt. By mid-December, it had shifted to anger and desperation. My father left a voicemail that bordered on threatening. "Ella, you need to call me back. We deserve to be part of this conversation. You wouldn't have gotten here without us raising you. You owe us that much. Don't forget where you came from." I listened to it once, then deleted it. He was wrong. I didn't owe them anything. If anything, I had gotten here in spite of them, not because of them. Chloe tried a different approach. She sent me a long, rambling email apologizing for everything. She claimed she had been jealous of me, that she had always felt pressure to be perfect, that she never meant to hurt me. She begged me to forgive her and to let her be part of my life again. The email went on for pages, detailing all the ways she supposedly regretted her actions, how she had always looked up to me, how she wanted us to be close. I read the email twice, searching for genuine remorse. I didn't find any. It was performative, carefully crafted to manipulate me into feeling guilty. The words were pretty, but they were empty. She didn't apologize for specific actions, just for vague mistakes. She didn't acknowledge what she had actually done wrong. I archived it without responding. My mother's attempts were the most persistent and invasive. She sent flowers to my new apartment. I donated them to a nearby hospital. She tried to contact my lawyer, who politely but firmly told her to cease all communication. She even somehow tracked down my location and showed up at a coffee shop in Austin where I was working one afternoon. I saw her through the window, looking around desperately, clutching her designer purse like a lifeline. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, but her eyes were red and swollen. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. I quietly gathered my things and slipped out the back exit before she could spot me. I wasn't interested in reconciliation. I wasn't interested in hearing their excuses or their manufactured apologies. I had spent 29 years being invisible to them, and now that I was finally visible, I didn't want them to see me. A month after the acquisition, I received an invitation to speak at a prestigious tech conference in Seattle scheduled for mid-January. The invitation came from the conference organizers themselves, who had read about my acquisition and wanted to feature me as a keynote speaker. It was exactly the kind of opportunity I had dreamed about for years. I accepted immediately, despite my anxiety about public speaking. This was part of my new life, and I needed to embrace it fully. I spent weeks preparing my presentation, focusing on my journey, the challenges I had faced, the technical innovations I had developed, and the lessons I had learned along the way. I didn't mention my family directly, but the subtext was impossible to miss. I had done this alone. The day of the conference arrived cold and clear. I stood backstage, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. But beneath the nerves was something else. Excitement, pride, and a fierce determination to own my story. When my name was called, I walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. The auditorium was packed with entrepreneurs, Investors, developers, and industry leaders, over 2,000 people. I looked out at the sea of faces and felt a surge of something I had rarely experienced: belonging. I began my presentation, speaking as confidently as I could about my company, my vision, and my plans for the future. The audience was engaged, nodding along, taking notes, laughing at my jokes, asking thoughtful questions during the Q&A session. I could feel their respect, their genuine interest, their admiration for what I had accomplished. And then, about halfway through my talk, I noticed two familiar faces in the back row. My father and mother. They were sitting together, my father's arms crossed defensively, my mother clutching her purse like a lifeline. They watched me with expressions that mixed hope, desperation, and something that might have been shame. I froze for just a split second, my breath catching. How had they found out about this event? How had they gotten tickets? Then I remembered. This was a public conference. Anyone could buy a pass. I took a deep breath and continued my presentation, refusing to let their presence derail me. I didn't look at them again. I focused on the people who actually cared about what I had to say. The people who saw me as a successful entrepreneur, rather than a disappointing daughter. When I finished, the applause was deafening. People stood, cheering, and I felt tears prick my eyes. I had done it. I had proven myself, not just to my family, but to myself and to the world. Several people rushed the stage afterward, wanting to talk to me, to exchange business cards, to discuss potential collaborations. As I walked off stage 20 minutes later, my parents tried to intercept me in the hallway. My father stepped forward quickly, his hand outstretched. "Ella, wait, we need to talk." I looked at him, then at my mother. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her mascara slightly smudged. She had been crying. "Please, sweetheart," she said, her voice breaking. "Just give us 5 minutes. That's all we're asking. Please." I shook my head slowly. "I don't have anything to say to you." My father's expression hardened, his jaw clenching. "You can't just cut us out of your life like this. We're your parents. We raised you. We sacrificed for you. We gave you a home, food, education. You sacrificed for me?" I felt a bitter laugh escape my throat. "You paid for nothing. You supported nothing. You believed in nothing I did." My mother reached out as if to touch my arm, but I stepped back. "We made mistakes, Ella. We see that now. But we love you. We've always loved you. Please, you have to believe that." "You didn't love me at Thanksgiving," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the emotion churning inside me. "You told everyone I was an embarrassment, a weight around your necks. You said $10,000 was more than I deserved." My mother's face went pale. She hadn't realized I had overheard that conversation. "You paid me to disappear," I continued, my voice growing stronger. "You wanted me gone so badly that you bought me a one-way ticket and handed me a check like I was some problem you could throw money at. So I left. That's what you wanted, isn't it?" My father's face turned red, his voice rising. "You're being completely unreasonable, Ella. After everything we did for you, we put a roof over your head for 18 years. "Everything you did for me?" I cut him off, my own voice rising now. "You did nothing. I paid my own way through college while you bankrolled Chloe's private school education. I built my company with my own hands, my own intelligence, my own determination, while you mocked me at every turn. You didn't believe in me. You didn't support me. You wanted me gone." "That's not fair," my mother said weakly, tears streaming down her face now. "We were trying to help you find your way." "Fair?" I stared at her. "You want to talk about fair? Was it fair when you didn't show up to my high school graduation speech? Was it fair when you laughed at my business idea? Was it fair when you told me I should get a real job because I'd never amount to anything? Was it fair when you spent thousands on Chloe's college while refusing to give me a single dollar? Neither of them had an answer. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I don't owe you forgiveness. I don't owe you a relationship. You made your choice 3 weeks ago. Now I'm making mine. Ella, please. My mother started, reaching for me again. But I turned and walked away, leaving them standing in that hallway. I didn't look back. Behind me, I heard my mother sob, and my father say something harsh and angry, but I kept walking. That night, alone in my hotel room, I let myself feel everything I had been holding back. I cried, not for them, but for the girl I had been, the one who had tried so hard to earn love that should have been freely given. I cried for all the years I had wasted hoping they would see me, acknowledge me, value me. And then I dried my tears, ordered room service, and started planning my next venture. The next morning, I woke up to another barrage of messages from extended family members. They had apparently heard about the confrontation at the conference. Some said I was being too harsh, that I should give my parents another chance. Others said they understood, but hoped I would eventually find it in my heart to forgive. But a few people surprised me. My cousin Brianna, whom I hadn't spoken to in years, sent me a long message. I always knew they treated you unfairly, she wrote. I saw it at every family gathering, every holiday. The way they lit up when Chloe walked in and barely acknowledged you. The way they talked about you when you weren't there. I should have said something, and I'm sorry I didn't. But I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. You don't owe them anything. Live your best life, Ella. You've earned it. That message meant more to me than any apology from my parents ever could. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself completely into my work and my new life. I started consulting for other startups, sharing the knowledge and experience I had gained. I made strategic investments in several promising companies, particularly those founded by women and underrepresented entrepreneurs who reminded me of my younger self. People who had been overlooked, dismissed, told they weren't good enough. I also started writing a blog about entrepreneurship, resilience, and the importance of cutting toxic relationships out of your life, even when those relationships are with family. The blog gained traction quickly, resonating with thousands of people who had experienced similar rejection and dismissal. I received hundreds of messages from readers sharing their own stories, thanking me for giving them permission to walk away from people who diminished them, who made them feel small. One woman wrote, "I've been trying to earn my father's approval for 40 years. Reading your story made me realize I never will, and that's okay. I'm enough on my own." It felt powerful to transform my pain into something that could help others. Meanwhile, my parents' situation continued its downward spiral. Through the few mutual acquaintances I hadn't blocked, I heard that they were being quietly ostracized by their social circle. People saw them as hypocrites and failures as parents, people who had rejected their brilliant daughter and were now desperately trying to claim credit for her achievements. The country club where my mother had been a member for 20 years quietly suggested she might be more comfortable elsewhere. The networking groups my father had belonged to suddenly had no room for him at their events. My mother had apparently become something of a recluse, rarely leaving the house except for necessary errands. The shame of being exposed as the mother who had paid her daughter to leave town was too much for her to bear in public. Her garden club friends had dropped her. Her book club disbanded after she burst into tears during a discussion about mother-daughter relationships. My father's small consulting business suffered as several clients quietly moved their work elsewhere, uncomfortable with his treatment of me. Word had spread about what he had done, and in Portland's tight-knit professional community, that kind of reputation damage was nearly impossible to repair. His referral network dried up completely. Chloe's situation was perhaps the most dramatic. Her promotion at work had been rescinded after her bosses saw the Thanksgiving video that kept resurfacing online. She was demoted back to her original position, and the humiliation became too much. She quit her job entirely, unable to face her coworkers. Hunter left her shortly after, citing her family drama and her own cruelty as reasons he couldn't stay in the marriage. Their divorce was swift and brutal. He kept the condo they had bought together. She moved back in with our parents. I heard through the grapevine that the three of them were now living together in quiet misery, each blaming the others for the situation they found themselves in. I didn't take pleasure in their suffering, but I didn't feel sorry for them either. They had created this situation through their own choices, their own cruelty, their own arrogance. 6 months after Thanksgiving, I was sitting in my beautiful new home in Austin, a house I had purchased outright with my acquisition money, when my phone rang from an unknown number. Something told me to answer. "Hello? Ella, it's your father." I should have hung up immediately. But curiosity won out. "What do you want?" There was a long pause, then a heavy sigh. I wanted to apologize. Truly, genuinely apologize. Not because I want something from you, but because I need you to know that I was wrong. I said nothing, waiting. "Your mother and I have been doing a lot of reflecting over these past months. We see now how badly we treated you, how completely we failed you as parents. We let our own insecurities and narrow definitions of success cloud our judgment. We were wrong, Ella, about everything, and I'm deeply, truly sorry." His voice cracked, and I realized he was crying. For a brief moment, I felt a flicker of something. Not quite sympathy, but an acknowledgement of his pain. But then I remembered. I remembered every dismissive comment, every missed event, every time they had chosen Chloe over me, every moment they had made me feel worthless. "I appreciate the apology," I said quietly, my voice steady. "But it doesn't change anything." "I understand," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't expect you to forgive us. I don't expect you to welcome us back into your life. I just needed you to know that we're sorry, that we see what we did, that we failed you in every way parents should never fail a child." "You did," I agreed simply. "Your mother wanted to call herself, but she couldn't stop crying. Chloe wanted to reach out too. We're all dealing with the consequences of our actions." "Good," I said. "You should be." There was a long silence. "Is there anything at all, that we could do to make this right?" he asked, desperation creeping into his voice. "No," I said simply. "There isn't. What's done is done." I heard him take a shaky breath. "I understand. I wanted you to know, and I wanted you to know that despite everything, we're proud of what you've accomplished." "You don't get to be proud," I said firmly. "Pride is earned through support and belief. You gave me neither." "You're right," he said quietly. "You're absolutely right." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of his words. "Goodbye," I said softly, and I hung up. I sat there for a long moment, holding my phone, feeling strangely empty. Then I set it down, called my dog Scout, the golden retriever I had adopted a month earlier, and went for a walk in the warm Texas evening. As the months continued to pass, I built a life I was genuinely proud of. I bought that house in Austin with large windows that let in floods of natural light, a backyard where Scout could run and play, and a home office where I could work on my new projects. The house had a small garden where I started growing vegetables, something I had never had space for before. I made real friends, people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could do for them, or how I reflected on them. I joined a women in tech group that met monthly. I found a book club that actually discussed books instead of gossiping. I connected with other entrepreneurs who understood the journey I had been on. I traveled extensively, finally visiting all the places I had dreamed about but never had the time or money to see. Tokyo, where I marveled at the intersection of tradition and technology. Barcelona, where I got lost in the Gothic Quarter and didn't mind at all. New Zealand, where I hiked through landscapes that looked like another world. Iceland, where I soaked in hot springs under the northern lights. I took up hobbies I had never had time for before, rock climbing at a local gym, where I loved the problem-solving aspect of finding the right route up a wall. Pottery classes, where I learned that I was terrible at it, but enjoyed it anyway. Piano lessons, where I slowly worked my way through pieces I had loved for years, but never thought I'd play. For the first time in my entire life, I felt whole, complete, free. I never reconciled with my parents or my sister. They reached out occasionally over the years, birthdays, holidays, the obligatory attempts at contact. But I kept my boundaries firm. I didn't owe them forgiveness. I didn't owe them a relationship. I didn't owe them access to the life I had built from the ashes of their rejection. They had given me a check and a plane ticket, thinking they were ridding themselves of an embarrassment, solving a problem, erasing a stain on their perfect family portrait. Instead, they had freed me to become everything they said I could never be. And I had used that freedom to build something extraordinary. My parents' lives never recovered from the public humiliation and private shame of what they had done. My mother became a complete recluse, leaving the house only for doctor's appointments and grocery shopping at odd hours when she was least likely to encounter anyone she knew. The vibrant social life she had once maintained, the book clubs, the luncheons, the charity committees, the garden parties, withered completely. She had built her entire identity around being the perfect mother with the perfect family, and when that facade crumbled, she had nothing left to stand on. Friends stopped calling. Invitations dried up. She spent her days alone in the house, surrounded by photographs of a family that no longer existed. My father's consulting business collapsed entirely within a year, as word spread through Portland's business community about how he had treated his own daughter. He was forced to take a job he considered beneath him, working for a former competitor at a fraction of his previous salary. The humiliation ate at him daily. He had always prided himself on his professional reputation, and watching it crumble was devastating. He aged 10 years in 12 months. Chloe struggled through a series of failed relationships and short-lived jobs, her reputation in Portland permanently tarnished by the viral video and her own vindictive behavior. No one wanted to hire the woman who had mocked her successful sister. No one wanted to date the woman who had been so publicly cruel. The golden child had tarnished beyond recognition, unable to escape the shadow of her own cruelty. She eventually left Portland, moving to a small town in Montana where no one knew her story, working at a grocery store, and living in a studio apartment that made my old place look like a palace. The family that had once looked down on me with such contempt now carried the weight of their choices every single day, their lives a testament to the consequences of valuing image over integrity, cruelty over kindness, and pride over love. As for me, I stood in my sun-filled home office in Austin, looking at the vision board I had created for my next venture, a platform to connect underrepresented entrepreneurs with resources and mentorship. Scout sleeping peacefully at my feet. I had built a life beyond their comprehension, achieved success beyond their imagination, and found peace beyond their reach. The revenge I had taken wasn't loud or dramatic. It was simply becoming everything they said I could never be, and doing it completely without them. I had learned that the best revenge wasn't destruction. It was success so complete that their absence from my life became the punishment they inflicted upon themselves. And as I sat down to work on my next project, surrounded by the life I had built with my own hands, my own mind, my own determination, I realized that the girl who had sat at that Thanksgiving table, clutching a check and a plane ticket, had finally, truly, completely found her way home.